Hey everybody, my name is Brad Wagner. We are live at the Paste Studio today with the founding member of the Boomtown Rats, creator of Live Aid, and now proud father of forthcoming album Citizens of Boomtown, the first new Boomtown Rats album in 36 years that comes out March 13th on BMG. Mr. Bob Geldof, man, thank you very much for being here.
You say studio. In fact, it's somebody's back bedroom.
Full of microphones and cameras and tapes and all of the equipment that we need.
And our secret tapes that you've been hoarding for years. Here they are.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's dive right into it right now. So we're in this tape vault right here, this tape museum of sorts. This goes all the way back to 1952, actually. The oldest tape in here is an Errol Garner tape from Storyville in Boston.
I thought you were going to start talking about a Boomtown Rats album from 1950. Dude, I'm not that old.
So we've got, in front of us, we've got a series of three tapes each of three different shows. This one on top was a show from the Orpheum in Boston. Hey, look at that. This is from March 17th, 1980.
Paddy's Day.
Good date. March 13th is the date of the album. Friday the 13th is when that comes out. And then St. Paddy's Day, 1980, Boomtown Rats on what would have been the second U.S. tour. Is that what would have been happening in 1980?
Yeah.
I already know this story because I saw you last night with David Frick at the hotel screening. But for the benefit of people who weren't there,
sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about? I mean, those anecdotes from the way the first round around the U.S. went are outstanding. I mean, in terms of what the label thought might be a good idea to send out, and
I mean, in a nutshell, the Boomtown Rats' career in the United States is a bit of a disaster, really. It kind of all started, we were on Mercury, and our first album was out of the box a hit in the UK. So it's 1976, 77. And it's that time when that cultural revolution that was the Ramones and the Talking Heads and television and Richard Hell and Blondie were happening here, and the Pistols and the Clash and the Boomtown Rats and Elvis Costello were happening in London. But the Americans don't really get this because they're immersed in disco and, shit rock, let's just call it shit rock. Boston, REO Speedwagon, you have no tapes of those, thank God.
That's not so true, but we can move right on.
I mean, we specifically came, us type of bands, to try and get rid of this. But we get great reviews. They don't really understand the racket that the Pistols are making. They don't get it. They don't hear what is now obvious, that it's a great album, They don't really hear that. They think that, the Clash is just Joe can't sing and stuff like that, and the Ramones is just too fast. That's what's going on. But they're trying to get in on this new thing. And so the Rats album comes and the reviews are amazing, because we're the new Who, we're the new Rolling Stones, we're an amalgam of both. And the reason they think that is because, we've got hooks all over the place. We're using a saxophone in the sort of gestalt of punk. In the rules of punk, you're not allowed to have sort of choruses and saxophones and stuff like that. It's, but that's all supposed to be negated. Well, fuck that, like if I want to use the sax, I'm going to use the sax. So the Yanks love this. And they say, these are the guys, watch out America, here they come. Except they didn't. And one of the reasons was because there's a guy, Mike Bone, who I still know to this day, and he's trying to get his head around how do I show Americans, how do I show these DJs this thing is proper rock and roll. This is it. So he goes, I've got this whole punk thing down. And he's a long hair with his satin jacket with, Bollocks FM or something on the back of it, and he says, bingo, I will order 1,000 actual dead rats from the New York City Sanitation Department, and I will staple them to the Boomtown Rats new single and send them out to every important DJ in the entire continent. Thanks, Mike. So these guys eagerly anticipating the new REO Speedwagon or the new Tavares single or whatever the hell it is. On their desk Monday morning lands this stinking, festering rat with our 45, No, lunar rotation didn't even come into it, So we were associated with this disgusting prank. Bone insists that I was all for it. I possibly was until we were taken off the air. So that was the beginning of the long history of disasters. We then moved to Colombia, and because they weren't going to do anything with this first album after that. That and the fact that no one would play it. It's pretty simple. I mean, in the movie that's just been made about the Rats, you see Bono saying if they just waited a second, a minute, an hour, a month, the Rats would have done it. It's not true. What happened, what broke away from disco and corporate rock, as it was called, was MTV. So a new technology came which showed the children of America a whole other type of music. So suddenly you get Madonna, you get Cyndi Lauper, you get Michael Jackson, you get Prince, you get the Eurythmics, you get Duran Duran, you get Boy George, you get U2. If the Sex Pistols, the Clash, the Boomtown Rats, the Ramones had MTV a year earlier or 2 years earlier, then it would have all been easy to explain. You'd have been sitting at home and your mother and father would have been saying, turn off that racket, and you'd be going. And they looked so cool, these bands. Very different, but cool. The Sex Pistols came in a wave of outrage, so everyone wanted them to be outrageous. They were just a great rock and roll band. Steve and Paul are amazing. Johnny just sang with such an attitude, it just invented this great voice for himself. And they look cool. And so if you'd been on MTV and seen it, you'd have got gone, dude, I'm in. But it just touring the country, small little clubs. As soon as you leave that town, you're never heard of again. It was all just too big and too much.
I've got sitting... I didn't put this here on purpose. I just know that it is right there. But this happens to be the last show the Sex Pistols ever played was at Bill Graham's venue. It was at the Winterland, and this is it. Yeah,
it's a very sad concert. I mean, they've had it. I equate it to the Beatles just saying, we just can't do this anymore. In their case, because nobody wanted to hear, nobody could hear, but nobody wanted to hear. And besides, they couldn't play where they were going. And if they can't play, if you literally can't play because the instrumentation wasn't there, their ambition was so huge, as we all know, way ahead of their time. They simply couldn't play it. So what are we doing here? For the Pistols, it was similar that they literally couldn't play. People would just, were just wanting to hear outrage, expecting to see it, and they were just a great rock and roll band, and they didn't want that. They didn't want to hear what they were doing. And it all ended in... they had to get rid of Sid. He was a loser, and but aside from that, it was perfect though. They were a comet, and they sketched an arc of perfection in one stunning record, which still absolutely stands the test of time. One of the great rock and roll records, and they weren't great live. I saw them. I was friendly with them. Should they have made 2-3 albums, it wouldn't be as perfect, as that cultural revolution needed to be. Just break everything. They created a nihilism, which is rarely creative, but in the void that they created, loads of creatives piled in and occupied that space and gave way to a whole new type of music. So, a great debt is owed to that band, I think.
That is as eloquent as I've ever heard that thought put. So thank you for coming on and saying that. I really like the way that you encapsulated that entire. Dude, I did, yeah. But
you should do it now.
I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to practice. I'm going to try to be as eloquent as that sentence just was. Sometimes I get them out, but not always. I liked that one. Can you slightly more eloquently than I'm about to speak about that vibe and the energy that you brought and that the Sex Pistols brought and that all those artists that you just mentioned brought in order to kick the hair rock bands in the ass and get there's shit rock, as you put it. That's an eloquent turn of phrase. The shit rock bands out, and you talk about some of the rage, the anger that that drove the Boomtown Rats to come into existence in '75, I believe, in the first place.
But there are real reasons for that. It's like anything that comes along. I'm less sure now. That period in which there's a couple of people standing behind here, in which we lived our lives, I think is over. I think the rock and roll period is over. And 50 years, if we want to be neat, 56 to 2006, but in reality, the year 2000, I suppose the last hurrah of that attitude renewed was probably Nirvana or Oasis. You know, that's where you can identify Elvis and Little Richard, Beatles, Rolling Stones, Dylan, the generation we talked about. And there's either no need for that now because it's done through social media, but all of that period can be explained through what was going on outside of music. It was just young people expressed what they were living through this minor art form that was capable of expressing, you know, the economics, the morality, the culture, the social norms of their time. And Elvis and Little Richard came about for a real reason, as did the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. In our generation, it was because, let's take New York, that's where we are. New York was bankrupt in 1975. I was here in 76. You could barely drive for the holes in the roads. The health service was closing down. The fire service weren't being paid. They went to Reagan and asked to bail out the city, and he said no. And so, you know, this thing was spiraling down, one of the greatest cities in the world. So only pride was holding it up. And out of that mess came the noise of that mess. The Ramones, you know, I mean, a perfect pop band, entirely ironic, you know, dressed in jeans with exact same holes, leathers exact same, pudding bowl haircuts, you know, classic setup, doing utterly meaningless lyrics, but completely explicable lyrics. You know, Blitzkrieg Bop is perfect. It's, you know, an exact expression. Blondie, you know, it's cartoon pop, but brilliant. In the UK, at the same year, inflation was 27%. There is no future economically in an economy with 27% inflation, when your dollar is worth 27% less month on month. You're in trouble. And if you're a kid trying to find a future, it isn't there. As Johnny Rotten wrote, there is no future in England's dreaming. If you're in Dublin in Ireland, like us lot, there's a civil war in the island where 3,600 people are being murdered, where the government is corrupt, tacitly supporting the killers, where the state religion, the church, is abusing the children of its parishioners when they're not, again, silent about the murders, a greater sin than anything, and a zero economy. So you make a noise that suggests all of that with unconsciously, which is the genius of pop. And we can go back to the great bands. Why do we call them California bands? Because it sounds like California, you know, and all that ethos without thinking about it. But that generation was the same as Elvis and Little Richard. I mean, Neil Young sums it up. You know, the king is gone, but he's not forgotten. This is the story of Johnny Rotten. And that's what happens. I don't think that works anymore. If we got all our ideas translated through this medium, if that was our social media, then today it comes down through the device we hold in our hands. The problem about that, is that we're in our own preferential ghetto. The music we like is all we listen to. And we walk around the street with our buds in, or everywhere with our buds in, listening to our music. It isn't shared anymore. It isn't a collective experience where we go, that's cool, what's that? And then a machine will tell you, oh, you like this, so you like that as well. We never break out either of our opinions, because we'll be led to people with the same opinion, or we'll get news feeds that, reinforce our opinions politically or otherwise. So for me, we're in the era of bland. It can't be anything else. It's great talent, great craft, great ability. I have none of those. All I've got is an attitude. So the music in Citizens of Boomtown, the new Rats record, is about the sense of being alive now, or at least the attitude of it.
Well, do you see, so if in 75, the right medium for you to express that anger, that rage, that push against the way society, the way politics were, the way everything was at that time, music was the right medium at that time.
Yeah.
You used, Live Aid in 1985, you used that platform in order to solve a crisis, or to do everything that you could in order to combat a thing that made you outraged and angry and shocked the same way.
Exactly.
So that was what
it's
made
an
sense in 85. So now in 2020, we do have the entirety of human history and learning in the palms of our hands, everybody. What do you see a clever way out of the bland and a clever 2020 contemporary medium that is exciting in 2020, the same way that Live Aid was in 85, the same way that the Rats were in 75?
The possibilities of the web are of course, endlessly exciting, and the pace of technology, you just can't keep up with it. It does confuse us. And it's collapsed the world in 2008. Countries were humiliated, millions out of work, thousands commit suicide, wars result, people move trying to find work, people move to escape wars, and what do? We throw up walls, barbed wire fences, oceans where they drown. And we think that's okay. And in our confusion, we retreat to a simpler politics, a politics of certainty. We are sure that we are Americans and it's going to be America first. Problem is that everyone thinks that they're Iranian, so it's Iran first, or it's Ireland first. And what we know from history is that isolationism and protectionism always, not just sometimes, always leads to war. So we need to be really careful now. And the device you're talking about is as much a device for communicating as it is for authority to monitor you. And authority always has a tendency to authoritarianism, so you always have to look out and be on the watch out. You always have to be fire watching. So when I sing a Rat song from back in the day, like someone's looking at you, and I sing it now, I'm not singing about 1979. I'm singing about Zuckerberg and Facebook and Google looking at you, always on, always listening, always monitoring, checking who you're talking to, picking up on your sentences, looking at your musical choices, your political choices, your ideas, your notions, what you're wearing, and packaging it up, sucking you into a package and selling it to a third party who then aim to exploit you. I don't like that. And I want a music that somehow rejects that as an idea of living. I think these vast companies are no different to the exploiters of the 19th century. I don't think Zuckerberg or Larry or Sergey are beneficial owners, or indeed maybe even people. And I think they should be broken up, and all the new kids who are inventing stuff should be allowed to breathe rather than be squashed by these companies. There's a lot of stuff going on that we just accept because we think we've outboarded our brain to our back pocket on these devices. And they are magnificent devices. But we've confused information with knowledge.
Right.
We Google something and there it is. But that's just information, understanding what's going on. or it is a problem. Pop put a frame of reference around our worlds and made it understandable. It didn't have to be specific. Some songs were specific. Some of John Lennon's or Dylan's songs were actually specific, or the Rolling Stones songs were specific. And there are songs today, but they have no resonance because that's not how we communicate our ideas. And nor do I think that'll ever return. We're back musically to the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, where you just had a cute song. And it was great. And as I say, great music. Billie Eilish's album is fabulous. And it's a great sensibility. There's an emotional sensibility. And loads of the stuff you hear, hip-hop continues to be relevant, but what do you say after NWA and Public Enemy and Eminem? There's loads of guys, but if I see another guy doing this stuff, I'm sick of it. It's 40, 50 years old already,
I can't explain why we saw that on the... Did you watch the Oscars on Sunday?
No, I never watched that crap.
Well, Eminem was very much on it, and I did not understand that at all. He did a good job, but he's doing the song from 8 Mile, which was, what was it, like a 12-year-old movie?
Yeah, but he's one of the elder statesmen of rock and roll now,
Sure.
And so I don't want to be an old guy bemoaning the demise of the rock era, because I don't bemoan it. I can only use, to your point, I've always understood, always, from the age of 11, because it was taught to me by the bands of my generation, that change was inevitable, change was desirable, and that the rhetoric of change was rock and roll. You could implement change through rock and roll, and the platform for change was rock and roll. And so we called our band after Woody Guthrie, who was Dylan's mentor and the great musical activist of the 20s and 30s, singing songs of the dispossessed, and famously, of course, the second American national anthem, This Land is My Land. Wonderful song, simple, beautiful. And so we call ourselves the Boomtown Rats, because Woody was in a gang when he was 11 years old called the Boomtown Rats. Once we had the name, I knew where we were going. We were going to be musical activists like Woody. And rock and roll always has been, for me, a form of musical activism. And we've used it. You wouldn't know I Don't Like Mondays is about what I'm singing about. We camouflage songs that became huge hits in choruses and musicality, and it gets to number one, and you go, yeah, I love this song. It's about not going to school on Monday or not going to work. Yeah. And you're walking down the street one day and you go, hold on, what the fuck? Yeah. It's like that. And that's powerful.
And what an unfortunate prediction that was.
Yeah.
Well, I like what you said about how pop music provides a reference for our times and for the culture. We appreciate you giving context on the 75 context around the Rats. Can we talk about the 2020 context around the Rats and specifically the album? So Citizens of Boomtown, again, if you're just joining us, if the internet's just joining us right now, March 13th, the album comes out on BMG with all of the original Rats plus one. Is that right? Or four?
No. We started with 6, album 4, the guitar player left. We didn't replace him. The stuff we were doing now didn't really need twin guitars. Then we paused after Band-Aids. So you start off and we're making a racket that suits appropriate to our lives. And by doing that, we help to articulate the oppressive silence that was Ireland at the time. Everyone was supposed to shut up and not complain. Well, that wasn't our gig. We were going to be noisy, and so you helped to change a country. And then we had hit after hit after hit, so you helped to change the music. And then we ended up doing Band-Aid and Live Aid, which helped to change the world. And I didn't understand what more we could do with our music. So we paused. Pete went off and became a big producer. Gary and Simon played with other bands, and I made 7 solo albums. And then a few years back, Gary and Simon came and said, do you want to try, doing the Isle of Wight Festival in Britain? The two big, like Coachella or Lollapalooza, Glastonbury, the Isle of Wight is our ones. And, the promoter said, if Geldof comes back and fronts it, I'll put you on the main stage. So that was cool because we had an objective. But actually, I think that I really needed to hear, as Bono calls it, that glorious noise that the Boomtown Rats make. And I think I needed to hear it again because the time had come around when I was getting just fed up of what was happening to the world. And I thought it was because I was curious. Were we a good band? You don't know when you're a kid. You're just, that's not where you're at. You're just playing. Is there some water there?
Yes.
But Vanity, I wanted to play in front of 100,000 people.
You got it.
Thanks. The cash was good.
Cheers.
Hey, Brad, the cash is always useful. Cheers,
Yep.
man. But when they started up and I began to sing those songs again, there was no evidence of nostalgia. I could sing, as I explained to you. Let's say I don't like Mondays, not for what happened in 1979, but for last week's school massacre.
Sure.
And suddenly these songs seem to have stood the test of time. This was not about nostalgia. The anger that propelled this band, the rage that was the animus, was clear and present. And we walked out on that stage. Clearly, the crowd responded to that. So what do bands do? They write for the now. You can't just go rely on... I mean, like everyone else, if I go and see U2, I want to hear One, I want to hear Bad, I don't want to hear the whole new album. Thanks, great, but no. When I go to the Rolling Stones, Mick, please, not the new 3 songs. Honky tonk fucking woman, dude, you know. exactly as you made the record, you know. We played with Lou Reed in Rome one year, and Lou decided he'd have a bubble perm. And he did Walk on the Wild Side as a disco version, you know. I wanted to walk on stage and knife him, you know, like this. Don't fuck with my music, you know. And so I want to do it exactly the same. And I'm in the zone of now. When the song starts, it's right now. But I'm lost. I'm gone. I'm free. And I'm floating free, and I can say and do anything I want, and I don't care what I say or do, and I don't care about the consequences. But what does now feel like to me? And what's the attitude? And I didn't think about it. It was easy for me to be Bobby Boomtown again, not solo Bob, who plays guitar and can talk and is, you know, more internal. And there was a great freedom to that, and I think you can hear that freedom all over the record. You can hear the noise, you can feel the sway and groove. And it strikes me as now. Now, it may not strike anyone else as that, but that doesn't bother me. There's a big English critic who I've known for years, and he just said, well, he said, A Tonic for the Troops, which is the second Rats album, Sex, Age and Death, which is one of my solo albums, and Citizens of Boomtown. He said, you don't need to do anything else in your life. And I said, actually true, that's cool. And then there's a book coming out at the same time.
Yep.
Tales of Boomtown Glory. And it's 40 years of lyrics. And I'm looking at this going, I'm really lazy. That's a shitload of work here, you know. Now I know what I've done with my life and the stories of the songs. And so you sort of... I don't think that time has, you know... 1976 is Tuesday last, you know. Time telescopes itself in your own life, somebody watching this. And it turns out that you did all this stuff. And it turns out that you did move the needle. That thing you thought, that rock and roll does change things. And you can change shit. You know, you complain about something, don't go cyber wanking, you know, online. It just disappears into the digital void. It means nothing. Authority knows how to circumvent that. Don't sign cyber... What do you call them?
The petitions.
Petitions.
Yeah,
they don't care. It's easy to get 6 billion things. They don't care, you know. But they need to know. They need to know they're not going to get away with it. And the only way to do that is to get out on the street That's the only way that a congressman will know. The only way is to knock on your neighbour's door and say, do you think this is shit? I do. You know, and it's wake up time, because it isn't looking good in England, in America, or anywhere. And, you know, I said this morning to someone, they were going on about our generation, and I was just looking at him and I said, dude, all generations fail, and some more spectacularly than others. And you're looking at one of the generation that failed spectacularly. You know, nobody even bothers thinking about nuclear bombs anymore. But any day, some guy will walk into the subway with his briefcase. Any second now, the Earth's temperature will make a catastrophic rise. That's a fact. What are we doing? Does it really take a 13, 15-year-old Swedish kid on the spectrum to come along and wake you up and just face down the brutality of power and just look at them in the face and tell it as it is? Great, well done her, you know. But we've left that, and I'm ashamed. And so that makes me angry. We thought we'd do something else, but that thing we're talking about came along and usurped all the effort. That thing that you quite rightly said, the most important invention in human history, you know. So I love the rapid change of the world. I love the new. You know, I wish I could hang around to sort of see how it's going to turn out. But hey, coronavirus is on the march, and like, you know, maybe a super spreader has just walked into this room. So, you know.
And I'll panic and freak out about it and tweet something about it as well.
Cool.
Dude, thank you so much for coming in. I want to show the internet.
Can I have my tapes back?
They're not my tapes. Trash Glam, Baby. I'm sorry, go
Proper
ahead.
45.
Yeah, the 45 exists now. This is available right now. This is the single off of lead single off Citizens of Boomtown.
It
It's
doesn't
coming
really
out
exist.
March 3rd.
We made 1,000 because I wanted a proper B-side. There's a proper B-side. It's not on the album. I just wanted B-sides. You know, what happened to B-sides? The throwaway track that's actually ends up being super cool.
Well, this is
You wanted. You're not getting it. You've got my bloody tapes.
you still have 999 of these, I think.
You know.
And there's on the same day as the album comes out, March 13th, the book Tales of Boomtown Glory
Yeah.
comes out as well. There's a film also, which I
movie.
saw, a 1-hour edit of a 2-hour movie. Is there a release date on that, or is that we're still at some point in the future it'll be
premiering
available?
at the Dublin Film Festival. The 2-hour, then it'll be on the streaming platforms. Probably the greatest film ever made, I like to think, you know. But you know, once upon a time in Boomtown, you know.
Well, thank you very much. All the
Cheers, man.
details
Thanks,
are up
Brad.
at boomtownratsofficial.com. Bob, this
Dude.
has been a total pleasure. Thank you for
you.
doing this. All right.